Cool. So the evolution of the modern day lighting designer. It's no surprise that as lighting and lighting technology has evolved, so has the role that we play as lighting designers. Of course, LED has played a huge part in this, but before that, our industry was evolving even then. You know, lighting designers have gone from once upon a time being people who broadly decided where to put candles, and then all of a sudden we discovered different color temperatures, the ability to dim, and now with the further miniaturization of LED, we can put light sources pretty much anywhere. But with this has come a host of new skills and understanding that we need to be able to do to keep doing what is known as lighting design. And so I just want to briefly touch on a few of these, how we're doing them and how we're integrating them in our roles where I work at Neolight. So it's really rare to find a profession that integrates art and science in balance as much as we do. You can go back as far as 350 BC, and it was someone as famous as Aristotle who first tried to separate these two ideas. And it's taken over 2,000 years to bring them back together again. Not only to pull them back together, but to show that in combination, we can produce some really wonderful things. Lighting design started out as a real basic need for survival. You know, the raw human element for heat and food, and that has spiraled into enhancing our safety, increasing nighttime vision, and now it's a regular part of the enhancement of interior spaces and architecture everywhere we go. And so if it was Aristotle that wanted to pull art and science apart, we really have a number of people to thank for bringing them back together again. People like Jonathan Spears, Derek Phillips, Richard Kelly, and Motoka Ishii have really pioneered our industry and what we do as lighting designers over recent years. So to put one of my early projects into perspective, one of the first ones I completed, there was no LED involved. It was all cold cathode and halogen with a smattering of compact fluorescent as well. And actually looking back on that, it was relatively easy to deliver and exceed the client expectations. They wanted a functional scheme, aesthetic qualities, a little bit of scene setting, and there we go. And we delivered and exceeded their expectation. Everyone was still really happy with it. But nowadays, clients are looking for more than that. They're looking for different things of lighting designers. And so to meet these expectations, we're having to work harder and work smarter. We're evolving and developing new skill sets. Not just sort of your usual CPD that a lot of offices are doing, but actually we need to become experts in loads of different areas that are even faintly attached to what lighting design is. You know, we wear many different hats at many different stages of the project, and aside from the tie, that's pretty much what I look like on a day-to-day basis. So we are not just designers anymore. We have to be experts in any number of fields, from Bluetooth and Li-Fi and anywhere that light and design can overlap. We have to understand the human eye and biology. We have to understand new technologies. We have to be experts in the Internet of Things, green building codes, and understand the differences between building a building in London, Dubai, Mumbai, anywhere in the world. But underpinning all of this is an expectation that we are digitally savvy. And that we understand what's going on. You know, loads of different industries are going through digitalization and change, and lighting is right up there with them. But with this evolution, we're not just lighting designers anymore. We're becoming experienced designers. We're not just enhancing spaces that people are spending time in and transitioning through. We're creating spaces for anybody that can see and visit them. Clients are not just after a space that looks or feels good anymore, like their early project. They want all their guests and the members of the public to have an experience as they pass through them. You know, they want to go viral on Twitter. They want to have that social media experience. And more often than not, they want one of these Instagram moments. And this has specifically come up, reference to an Instagram moment in 2 of our recent projects brief. So we are working with architects and interior designers to frame a particular view. Maybe it's as you come in through the lobby, maybe it's the view off the pool deck looking at a vista out to sea, but we have a specific requirement from clients to help create and frame one of these Instagram moments that the venue will be known for on social media. So as we develop our skill set to meet this evolution of lighting design, some things are quite clear and obvious and a real natural progression. So things like Revit and BIM are really the kind of coordination that lighting design has been after for a long time, but it's a relatively recent idea that we're directly contributing to a central model on a project. You know, we're now working in clash detection, error minimization, and coordination really early on in the project, which is helping all the disciplines. And so these benefits are really obvious, really easy to see, and so it's easy individually and as a business to spend time training your staff, investing in the software, and actually being able to do this on projects instead of passing it over and saying, so sorry, we're not Revit ready, we can't actually make a bid for this project. But then other things are slightly harder. harder to understand, and often even harder to implement. Things like virtual reality. This probably started out a few years ago as a novelty gimmick that you could queued up at a trade show to have a go on, but actually it's so much more than that. Being able to take your client away from a 2D laptop or a static Photoshop render and drop them headfirst into a lit environment. A V-Ray render with a realistic daylight, realistic lighting scene sets, personalized viewpoints, completely fill in their peripheral vision. They can be sitting at a meeting table and they can have a look around their whole space. And this is one of the most powerful tools we have in getting that often elusive client sign-off and giving them one of the most realistic visuals of what their space will ultimately look and feel like. It's so much more powerful than a static or a 2D render. The trade-off is that comes with its own time and monetary investments, but so far for us at least, we found it worthwhile to be a relatively early adopter of virtual reality. Another hard thing to get your head around is the ability to code or script as a lighting designer. We're not back-end developers, we're not web designers, so why do we need to be able to know what this means and be able to generate it ourselves? Well, it's so we can start to do some fun things like this. If you told me a couple of years ago that I'd be writing script for my projects, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But here I am doing things like this, and although this is a pre-recorded video clip that just about says dark that you can make out, the original application for this was venue signage projected on the floor of a restaurant, and the scattering of particles was dictated by the amount of pedestrians walking past the camera at the entrance. So it's a completely dynamic and ever-changing projection that is always different anytime you go there, and that is because we learned to script, we brought that skill in-house, and we could offer that to the client. We can also take something relatively simple, like a static 2D logo, and add a new layer to it. Add something dynamic, add a new layer of visual interest, and just bring things to life a bit. Again, this is just a random particle system that spins round and round, but again, it could be influenced by any number of sensors. And again, this is done with C++ script that, again, we've done in-house. And so this is another reason why we've learned to do the sort of techie back-end coding of things. And then moving away from projections a little bit more, we've also ventured into the world of Python programming and developed a prototype app that takes personal user preferences in a hotel room and offsets different color temperatures and different brightnesses depending on the time of day. So you no longer have fixed scenes in a hotel room. Somebody who's part of the Hilton Honors program can get the Hilton app, access our interface through that, and have their own personalized preset scenes as part of their hotel experience. And that is done in Python as well. So it's another type of programming that we've needed to learn to be able to offer something new to a client and sort of differentiate ourselves as lighting designers. Now, one of the huge things that I'd be missing out on if I didn't mention it is human-centric lighting. And I kind of have to mention it because it's everywhere at the moment, even though I don't necessarily agree with it. And my issue with it is that if you try and describe human-centric lighting, you just end up describing lighting design. Human-centric lighting design is really not a great deal different to the lighting design that we're doing day-to-day in most or even all of our projects. Whether it's something functional, whether it's increasing nighttime safety, or whether it's purely aesthetic, who is looking at and experiencing our schemes if it's not other humans? Everything we do is human-focused. But we now have this other marketing tract that lighting influences our circadian rhythms. And we know to a degree how and why this is, but we don't know the full extent of it. Many manufacturers have taken up this human-centric challenge and give you this spiel that if you buy their lights, obviously, you will get all these magical side effects and none of the downsides, but I'm still a little bit skeptical. I don't think we're quite yet there. And my basis is that this guy here, Professor Russell Foster, who's pretty much the world's top authority on the subject, he said earlier this year outright that it's too early to start human-centric lighting and that we just don't know. Now, if he's saying that, I'm pretty much going to side with him. It's a clear responsibility that if we don't fully understand what we're doing, should we be doing it? Should we be enforcing that on a client or a guest or someone else unsuspecting? And so the knock-on effect of this marketing spiel that a lot of manufacturers take is that clients are grabbing this headline, this buzzword, and then coming to us and saying, we want human-centric lighting. And so part of what we're having to do is push back and educate the client and say, whilst tunable white or dim to warm do have places on some of our projects, they're actually no more human-centric than the rest of the scheme that we're putting forward for you. And so as lighting becomes more and more relevant in the world of energy saving, and people grab all these phrases and sort of headlines on Twitter and clickbait and things like that, lighting design is obviously coming more to the fore. People are hearing about it, understanding what we do, but with it comes a lot of misconceptions. And so we're often educating people and educating other consultants about what lighting design is, what can and can't be done. Perhaps you don't need as many downlights as you think you do. You know, explaining to people why color temperature and binning is important, and even to a degree, explain to people that more often than not, we're darkness designers. Choosing what not to light is just as powerful as choosing what we do choose to illuminate. And that is the one that really catches people. But aside from the visual thing, we also have these new technical aspects. You know, we have things like TM30 that is beginning to slowly replace CRI. You know, we have L80, B10. We need to understand all the fine nuances and the differences between all these points. If we cannot ourselves understand them and clearly convey them onto a client, how can we have faith and ask them to spend money to build and implement our scheme? And so as we move through this explosion of LED that most of us have experienced, things are starting to get much, much smaller. You know, light sources are getting so small that we can virtually integrate them anywhere. But likewise, we can put other things back into the light source, things like sensors, things like cameras, and that leads us to the wonderful world of the Internet of Things, the IoT. And so lighting is a prime choice to piggyback this system on, because in the ceiling and all around us, we have this ubiquitous infrastructure of power and often data, and we have all these cables running everywhere. If the Internet of Things needs this too, why do they need a separate system when we can offer the same support infrastructure for them? You know, we've gone beyond just basic DALI interfaces and light fixtures reporting back how they're doing. We're actually connecting things that are sensors and things that are not lighting. And so in order to be able to implement a scheme that is IoT-centric, we need to understand things that are not traditional lighting design. We have to understand what Bluetooth beacons are. We have to understand mesh networks. We have to understand cloud servers and data. And what it means is that we can then start to monitor occupancy in offices. We can improve customer retail experiences. And this is becoming part of lighting design. So we're having to learn things that aren't lighting design in order to do lighting design. And that's one of the struggles that we're continuing with in order to be able to keep up the pace and offer schemes to clients that utilize all these new technologies. You know, it's more than just using your Google Home to turn on your hue lamps in your apartment or wherever you live. This is architectural lighting that is truly smart and connected at the same time. You know, just to prove a point, there's a cheesy photo of me. I'm no longer just getting out of the office and visiting project sites or going to meetings. We're visiting these data centers where they are testing these sensor-embedded lights so we can understand all the data that they can capture, the millions of data points that they do, and then, you know, what we can do with it. And it's a bit of a cheesy photo, but I put it up there just to make a point. You know, I'm not spinning, you know, a fantasy life of a lighting designer and things that I hope to one day do. This is me about 6 months ago. So as of earlier this year, this is stuff that we're doing day to day in our jobs, in our real working practice. And so as technology moves on, it becomes cheaper and easier to experiment and develop our own things. You know, part of encouraging designers in our office is not just, you know, working with a manufacturer for a bespoke finish on a downlight or a custom extrusion, something like that. We're getting hands-on and making our own things. So this is an Arduino-powered, well, there's a microphone here at the bottom, there's an Arduino at the back, it's powered by a laptop, and we've got some LEDs and resistors sitting there. And this is a sound-reactive set of LEDs as a proof of principle that the LEDs blink and bounce in time to the input that this microphone receives. And just with a little potentiometer on the side, you can measure anything from ambient light levels to big drum claps or whatever. And then we're also getting a bit more technical. And this is a robotic arm that picks up pieces of dichroic filter and moves them in front of a light source to create different light effects. And by giving our staff these opportunities to play and mess about in, you know, some of the quieter periods that we have, when an opportunity arises on a project, you know, they have this skill set and knowledge and these ideas to put back into a live project. So we've already used sound reactive LEDs on a project, although we are still waiting for a client to approve the use of a robotic arm. So if anyone here is keen for that, come and find me afterwards, because we've got some fun things we can do. I'm running out of time just about, so I'll start to wrap up. I could really talk for double the amount of time again for all the different things that we're doing and how lighting design is evolving. But most of us, myself included, are somewhere along this pathway, this evolution of lighting design that's ongoing. Most of us are at some point on it. Who could have imagined even a few years ago we would have a subscription model where you can rent your light fixtures, lighting as a service. We now have Li-Fi, secure, high-speed wireless data transfer through light. And we even have specialist LEDs growing our lunch for us as well. This is not something we could really have even envisaged a couple of years ago, but actually it's happening today. And so if that's happened in the past few years, what does the future hold? Will we ever have an affordable OLED panel? Will we be able to produce LED chips with a singular high color rendering for a specific wall finish that we want to render? Or will hipster cafes ever stop installing squirrel cage lamps? That trend may outlive us all. We may never know about that one. But given the development that's happened in our lifetime already, who knows really what the future holds for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Fascinating insight. That's really good. And the skills you're learning are quite impressive. Okay, we're going to take another little quick pause. Then we're going to be back with the Society of Light and Lighting, a much anticipated double act. Okay, Brendan, are you ready? Okay, give us a...